What would you do if someone stole your life's work and left you with nothing but broken dreams? Today, I'm going to tell you a story about Lena Martinez, a woman who spent 15 years plotting the perfect revenge against the person who destroyed her musical career. This is the story of the broken violin, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why sometimes justice comes not from the courts, but from the most unexpected places. Lena was once considered a prodigy. At 25, she had already composed 3 symphonies that professors at the Manhattan Conservatory called revolutionary. But one betrayal changed everything, and what she did about it 15 years later will leave you speechless. Let me take you back to 2008. Lena Martinez was living her dream as a composition professor at one of New York's most prestigious music schools. She had shoulder-length black hair that she always kept in a neat bun, wire-rimmed glasses, and fingers that seemed to dance across piano keys like they were speaking a secret language. Every morning, she would arrive at the conservatory an hour early, just to sit in the empty concert hall and listen to the acoustics. The way sound traveled through that space inspired her compositions. Her students adored her because she didn't just teach music theory, she taught them to feel the music in their bones. But Lena had a secret project. For 3 years, she had been working on what she believed would be her masterpiece, a symphony she called Echoes of Tomorrow. It was unlike anything she had ever created. The piece combined classical orchestration with subtle electronic elements and unconventional time signatures that somehow made perfect sense. She would spend hours after her regular classes, alone in practice room 7, perfecting every note. The composition was so personal to her that she hadn't shown it to anyone, not even her closest colleague and supposed best friend, Victoria Chen. Victoria was everything Lena wasn't. Where Lena was quiet and introspective, Victoria was charismatic and ambitious. She had joined the conservatory the same year as Lena, but she had a way of making herself the center of attention in every room she entered. Victoria conducted the student orchestra and had connections throughout the classical music world. She often told Lena that she was too modest, that she needed to promote herself more if she wanted to succeed in the competitive world of classical music. Lena trusted Victoria completely. In March of 2009, Lena made the biggest mistake of her professional life. She was finally ready to debut Echoes of Tomorrow at the annual Spring Festival, the conservatory's most important event, where industry professionals came to discover new talent. 3 weeks before the performance, Lena did something she had never done before. She shared her complete composition with Victoria. Not just the sheet music, but also her detailed notes about the emotional journey each movement was meant to represent. Victoria listened to Lena play through the entire piece in practice room 7. She sat in the corner chair, occasionally nodding and making small, appreciative sounds. When Lena finished, Victoria's eyes were actually filled with tears. "Lena," she said, "this is beyond beautiful. This is going to change your life." Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest. Finally, someone understood what she had been trying to create. Victoria asked if she could take a copy of the composition home to study it more carefully. She said she wanted to help Lena prepare for the debut by suggesting the best way to present it to the audience. Lena hesitated for just a moment, then she handed over everything. The complete score, her personal notes, even recordings of her playing through different sections. 2 weeks later, Lena's world collapsed. She was in her office grading student papers when her department head knocked on her door. His face was grave. He told her that there had been a complaint about her upcoming performance. Someone had accused her of plagiarism. Lena's heart stopped. The accusation came from Victoria herself. Victoria claimed that Echoes of Tomorrow was actually her composition, and that Lena had somehow gotten access to it and was trying to pass it off as her own work. Victoria had submitted the exact same composition to the festival committee 3 days earlier. Since Victoria had submitted first and had witnesses who could testify that she had been working on a piece with those exact characteristics, the committee had no choice but to investigate. Lena tried to explain that the composition was hers. She showed them her notebooks filled with years of sketches and revisions. She played recordings she had made on her phone during late-night practice sessions. But Victoria had been clever. She had prepared her own fake notebooks and had coached several mutual acquaintances to testify that they had heard her humming melodies from the piece months earlier. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Lena was suspended from teaching. She spent her days in her small apartment, playing the piano and trying to make sense of what was happening to her life. When the investigation concluded, the committee ruled in Victoria's favor. They said that while they couldn't prove definitively who had created the composition, there was enough doubt about Lena's claim that they couldn't allow her to perform it. Victoria's version of Echoes of Tomorrow premiered at the Spring Festival to a standing ovation. 3 major orchestras contacted her that night wanting to commission new works. A recording contract followed within a month. Lena watched from the back of the concert hall as Victoria conducted her stolen masterpiece. She saw the way Victoria smiled and bowed as the audience applauded. She noticed how Victoria's eyes searched the crowd until they found Lena's face. For just a moment, their eyes met. Victoria's expression wasn't triumphant or guilty. It was cold, calculating. As if she was measuring whether Lena had truly been defeated, the scandal destroyed Lena's reputation in academic circles. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Other professors began to question whether her previous compositions had really been her own work. Students stopped signing up for her classes. By the end of the semester, the conservatory had quietly decided not to renew her contract. Lena spent the next 2 years fighting to clear her name. She hired lawyers, reached out to music journalists, and tried to get anyone to listen to her side of the story. But Victoria's star was rising too quickly. Echoes of Tomorrow had launched Victoria into the upper echelons of the classical music world. She was now the principal conductor of a respected symphony orchestra and was being featured in major music magazines. Who was going to believe the accusations of a disgraced ex-professor against such a successful artist? By 2011, Lena had given up. She moved to a small apartment across town and took a job teaching piano lessons to children in a community center. Her dreams of composing professionally were over. But something inside her had changed. The quiet, trusting woman who had once believed in the goodness of people had been replaced by someone harder. Someone who understood that sometimes the world didn't reward talent or honesty. Sometimes it rewarded whoever was willing to take what they wanted. But this story isn't about giving up. This is about a woman who understood that the best revenge isn't served hot. It's served cold, ice cold, and it's served exactly when your enemy thinks they're safest. For 15 years, Lena disappeared from the classical music world. Victoria probably assumed she had broken her former friend completely, that Lena had given up on music and faded into obscurity like so many other failed artists. Victoria was wrong. During those 15 years, Lena was planning. She kept track of every award Victoria won, every orchestra she conducted, every interview she gave. Lena also kept composing. In her small apartment, she created piece after piece, not for performance, but for practice. She was honing her skills, developing new techniques, and most importantly, she was documenting everything. Every composition was dated, recorded, and stored with multiple witnesses. She had learned from her previous mistake. She would never again be caught without proof. Lena also changed her appearance. She dyed her black hair auburn and let it grow long. She traded her wire-rimmed glasses for contact lenses. She started dressing differently, speaking differently, even walking differently. She became someone Victoria wouldn't recognize at first glance. In 2019, Lena saw an opportunity. The Manhattan Conservatory announced that their annual Spring Festival would be celebrating its 50th anniversary with the biggest event in the school's history. Victoria, now internationally famous, would be the featured guest conductor. She would be performing a special anniversary piece with a full orchestra. The festival would run for 3 days and would attract music lovers from around the world. More importantly, it would be broadcast live on classical music networks and streamed online. Lena applied for a job with the cleaning company that serviced the conservatory. She had to submit to a background check, but her criminal record was clean. As far as anyone knew, she was just another middle-aged woman who needed work. She got the job. For 6 months before the festival, Lena worked as a custodian in the same building where she had once been a respected professor. She cleaned the same practice rooms where she had composed her stolen masterpiece. She mopped the floors of the concert hall where Victoria had performed Echoes of Tomorrow. And every day, she gathered information. She learned the security codes, the staff schedules, and most importantly, the technical setup for the live broadcast. The 50th anniversary festival was scheduled for the first weekend in April 2024. Victoria arrived 3 days early for rehearsals. She looked exactly like Lena remembered, just 15 years more polished. Her success had given her a confidence that radiated from every gesture. She wore expensive clothes and spoke to everyone with the casual authority of someone who was used to being the most important person in the room. During the rehearsals, Lena watched from the shadows. She saw how Victoria interacted with the student musicians, how she commanded the orchestra, how she accepted the praise of the conservatory faculty Victoria was performing. Lena's stolen composition as the centerpiece of her anniversary concert. She had refined it over the years, adding her own touches and improvements, but the heart of the piece, the revolutionary core that had made it special, was still Lena's. On Thursday evening, 2 days before the main performance, Lena was cleaning practice room 7, the same room where she had first played Echoes of Tomorrow for Victoria all those years ago. She was alone in the building except for one security guard who spent most of his time watching sports on his phone. Lena opened her custodial cart and pulled out something that wasn't a cleaning supply. It was a small digital device about the size of a smartphone. She had spent 2 years and most of her savings developing this piece of equipment with the help of a tech-savvy nephew. The device could interface with the conservatory's sound system and broadcast equipment. It could override the normal audio feed and replace it with a pre-recorded track. All she had to do was plug it into the main control panel during the live performance. But that wasn't the most impressive part of her plan. The real genius was what she planned to broadcast. Remember, I told you that Lena had spent 15 years documenting her compositions. Well, she had also been documenting something else. Her original recordings of Echoes of Tomorrow. The phone recordings she had made during those late-night practice sessions in 2008 and 2009, recordings that were time-stamped months before Victoria's supposed creation of the piece. But Lena had gone further than that. She had tracked down other composers whose work Victoria had stolen over the years. It turns out that Victoria's meteoric rise hadn't been built on just one act of plagiarism. She had made a career out of taking credit for other people's compositions. Lena had found 4 other musicians whose work Victoria had claimed. 2 of them had been students at the conservatory. One had been a freelance composer who had submitted pieces for Victoria to review. Another had been a colleague at Victoria's current orchestra. All of them had the same story. They had trusted Victoria with their work, and Victoria had found ways to claim it as her own. Lena had spent months convincing these composers to work with her. She had helped them gather evidence, organize their proof, and most importantly, she had convinced them to go public. Her plan wasn't just to expose Victoria's theft of Echoes of Tomorrow. She was going to expose 15 years of systematic plagiarism, and she was going to do it during Victoria's moment of greatest triumph. In front of the largest audience Victoria had ever performed for, the device Lena had created would interrupt the live broadcast at the climax of the stolen symphony. Instead of Victoria's conducting, viewers around the world would hear a carefully produced documentary. It would start with Lena's original recordings of Echoes of Tomorrow. Then it would present testimony from all 5 composers whose work Victoria had stolen. Each composer would play their original compositions and explain how Victoria had taken credit for their creativity. The presentation would include timestamps, witness testimony, and irrefutable evidence. By the time it was finished, Victoria's career wouldn't just be over. Her reputation would be destroyed so completely that she would never work in classical music again. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. The conservatory's concert hall was packed with over 2,000 people. The live stream had attracted viewers from 37 countries. Victoria appeared on stage wearing a stunning black gown. She looked confident and radiant as she raised her conductor's baton. The orchestra began to play. For the first 20 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Victoria conducted Lena's stolen masterpiece with skill and passion. The audience was clearly moved by the performance. Several people in the front rows were actually crying. Lena watched from the wings, dressed in her custodial uniform. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She had spent months practicing this momentum. At exactly 9:47 p.m., during the most emotional crescendo of the piece, Lena activated her device. The music stopped. The lights in the concert hall dimmed slightly, and then, through every speaker in the building and every device streaming the performance, came a voice, Lena's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lena Martinez, and I need to tell you about the theft of my life's work." The confusion in the concert hall was immediate. Victoria stopped conducting and looked around wildly. The orchestra members lowered their instruments. Audience members pulled out their phones, unsure if this was part of the performance. For the next 12 minutes, Lena's documentary played. Her original recordings of Echoes of Tomorrow filled the space. The testimony of the other stolen composers created a devastating case. Most powerfully, the presentation included video footage that Lena had secretly recorded during her months as a custodian, footage of Victoria in private moments, discussing her compositions with colleagues. In several clips, Victoria could be heard making disparaging comments about untalented composers who couldn't make it in the real world. She laughed about how easy it was to take credit for other people's work. She even mentioned Lena by name, calling her that pathetic piano teacher who never understood how the music business really works. When the documentary ended, the concert hall was completely silent. Victoria stood frozen on the conductor's platform. Her face had gone completely white. Some audience members were already heading for the exits. Others were taking photos and videos with their phones. The live stream chat was exploding with comments. Victoria tried to salvage the situation. She grabbed a microphone and attempted to address the audience. She claimed that the interruption was a malicious attack by a disgruntled former employee. She insisted that all of her compositions were original, but her voice was shaking, and the evidence that had just been presented was too comprehensive to dismiss. By Sunday morning, the story had gone viral. Music blogs, social media, and even mainstream news outlets were covering the scandal. The hashtag number stolen symphonies was trending worldwide. Victoria's management company dropped her before noon. The orchestra that employed her as principal conductor announced that she was suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, that suspension had become a termination. One by one, the other composers came forward publicly. They held press conferences, gave interviews, and shared their own evidence. The classical music community rallied around them. Several major orchestras announced that they would be implementing new policies to prevent plagiarism. Victoria attempted to fight back with lawsuits, but the evidence against her was overwhelming, and her legal team eventually advised her to settle out of court. The financial penalties were severe enough to force her to sell her apartment and most of her possessions. But the real punishment was the complete destruction of her reputation. She would never conduct a professional orchestra again. Lena, meanwhile, was finally receiving the recognition she deserved. The original recording of Echoes of Tomorrow was performed by the New York Philharmonic 6 months later. This time, Lena's name was prominently featured on all the promotional materials she was offered, teaching positions at 3 different conservatories. Multiple orchestras commissioned new works from her. But perhaps most satisfying of all, the Manhattan Conservatory offered her Victoria's old position as principal conductor. Lena returned to practice room 7 for the first time in 15 years. She sat at the same piano where she had first played Echoes of Tomorrow. The room looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. She was no longer the trusting young professor who believed that talent and hard work were always rewarded. She had learned that sometimes justice requires patience, sometimes it requires planning, And sometimes it requires the courage to risk everything for what's right. Victoria had stolen 15 years of Lena's career. But in the end, Lena had taken something far more valuable. She had taken back her truth, and she had ensured that Victoria's lies would never hurt another artist again. The broken violin had finally played its last note. What do you think about Lena's revenge? Was it justified after 15 years of stolen credit? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of calculated justice, thanks for watching.